Hi, I just wanted to throw this segment in here since I didn't mention it at the beginning of the video. But the main objective, or the way that I'm going to be going into this review, is showcasing certain stuff that I have seen for this upcoming film. But I'm going to be bringing up points from the original film as of why those particular ones, for the most part, were pretty successful with their own reasonings, and then kind of then going on to the points that I've seen for this upcoming film and kind of talk about it in that regard. So mention why the past ones were good, and then kind of bringing up some like similar points with this upcoming one, and just seeing like it's probably not going to be as good. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that before this video starts. But yeah, anyways, hope you enjoy. What's up, people? And here I am going to be giving my thoughts and opinions for the upcoming film Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So here's how I'm going to break this down. First, I'm going to get into my initial thoughts for the upcoming film. Then from there, I'm going to be talking about the main character himself being Indy. Then from there, I will be talking about the scenes, in particular of how real/tense and grounded they were. And then I'm going to be talking about the side characters, in particular one you'll see as I move on to that point later on in the video, and just try to talk about how well implemented they were. Then from there, I'll finish it off then with my ending thoughts. So when it comes to my initial thoughts for the upcoming film, like I said, I'm going to be basing it around the trailer and an article that I have read. So when it comes to the actual trailer, I could probably expect some expected type of action scenes that I'm used to from old Indiana Jones films. But I really wouldn't be surprised if there are just some scenes in this film that, well, decides to pull a nuke fridge from the Crystal Skull. Very believable stuff. So the actual ancient artifact that is shown within the trailer, I'll admit, it is a bit interesting in that it supposedly has to do with time traveling. I mean, I guess I can say this. It at least sounds a bit more interesting than just finding some glowing rocks from the Temple of Doom. Yeah, it's at least more interesting than that. And that first topic is about the main character himself, Indy. So from the first film, we get the idea on the kind of character that Indiana Jones is. An archaeologist full of passion in discovering ancient type remarks, being put in tense situation when fighting bad guys, while having certain moments that kind of brings him back into humanity, and not making him like some immortal kind of superhero that realistically will just kind of make us feel, like disconnected from the character. Especially an example being, with the whole him not liking snakes.
There's a big snake in the plane, Doc! Oh, that's just my pet snake, Reggie! I hate snakes, Doc!
Now, it makes sense that as these recent films have been coming out, especially with this new one, it makes sense that he has pretty much has gotten older. And especially the fact that he is in his 80s with this upcoming film. But I get this feeling of disingenuous with this particular film, specifically when it comes to the character roles. But I'll get more into about that when we get to the side characters topic. What I'll end is that I feel like, in this case, they should have either finished this franchise like a few films ago and not have to worry about making, I guess potentially, garbage or just bad movies in general. Or they could have just at least still just, if this is the final movie, they should have just kept the legacy of him still being the main character. The second topic I want to get into is that the scenes were real/tense. So the one thing I want to give credit, and especially with the first film, is that the actual scenes, they were legitimate. When looking at behind the scenes footage, I can appreciate the lack of CGI or just in general certain scenes not necessarily looking so great, you know, and especially with the fighting scenes. An example of that being the desert chase from the Lost Ark. seeing scenes of Indiana Jones holding onto the rope while the truck is driving along and getting sand bits all over his face, it's pretty remarkable in that regard. As of ratings starting critics, some were saying that the upcoming film looked quite fake a lot through the film, with one of the quotes stating, part of what dims the enjoyment of this concluding chapter is just how glamourly fake so much of it looks. And if true, really, honestly, it just reminds me of like Crystal Skull scenes, because looking like too much, like it's just, pretty much you can tell that it's like in a studio and not like looking at more at least authentic in a way. An example of that, honestly, would just have to be the sword fighting scene from Crystal Skull, and yeah, it's honestly a bit disappointing. So as of a continuation from the last points of scenes feeling real/tense, I'm now going to end off this second point of that scenes were more grounded. So again, as a continuation from the last points, certain scenes, they just, in simple terms, they just felt more grounded. I would say that the Lost Ark felt more grounded, while the other films started to be more crazy. But certain scenes from those, crazier, films, I can say they were enjoyable to some regard. Now, what I mean by grounded is I'm talking about grounded where even though we may question like certain scenes of being, I guess, not so realistic, but again, this is Hollywood at the end of the day, and as long as it doesn't go to a point where we just eventually just kind of disconnect ourselves from such an over the top scene. An example again from the Crystal Skull is when that UFO submerged from the enclosed space and then a whole bunch of rock pieces just floating everywhere. Even especially a portal opening to another dimension just before. And lastly, I'm going to be talking about the side characters. Well, more like just one side character. So I'll be using the example of Short Round, since I believe he was among the best side character alongside Indiana Jones. And as we all know, Indiana accompanied with Short Round after catching him pickpocket Indy, and then they got along afterwards. Furthermore, he was able to help out Indy and have that bond with him. An example being when Short Round helped Indy and Willie Scott escape the scene after a shoot-off, which indicates, him being helpful. And an example of them both playing cards when they're in the middle of a jungle, just, resting for the night. And while they're playing, he noticed that Indy was potentially cheating, which shows that sort of bondage between them that they have developed. With this in mind, it still keeps aligned, of Indy being the main character while adding new characters to go along the journey with him. That's why when I said earlier, I get the feeling of disingenuous of passing the role on to another character instead of keeping it to Indy and expressing his experiences. Especially if they have decided to drop off Indy just to send out a feminist message of empowered women as main characters. Realistically, being quite disrespectful to the legacy as a whole. Now, I want to be clear. This would not be a problem if they actually just made an original film that was being done, and then you can actually add a main character being a female of that original film without having to ruin an existing franchise to how it was recognized in the first place. So in conclusion, my ending thoughts, as a whole, I'm not super excited for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, especially with the disrespect of stepping down Indy for the sake of ruining the legacy by implying a feminist message, to critique saying how fake looking the film is, etc. There are many reasons as to why fans have every right to be concerned for this upcoming film. And being honest, I'm mainly going to be focusing this film when comparing it to The Crystal of Skulls. Since that one had so many flaws, I would like to see how at least this film could maybe at certain times maybe be better than The Crystal of Skull. And maybe depending on what is showcased here, maybe I can try to compare it with at least some of the other like 3 previous films as well. But I'm not going to get my hopes up so high since I'm pretty doubtful that this will somehow. I mean, yeah. First of all, I do not think that this is going to match the equal greatness as the old films. But I don't know. I don't know. Doubtful, but we'll see. But yeah, that is all I wanted to mention about this film, and I'll be seeing how it go once I eventually see it. Also, screw capitalism. Am I right?
You stole it.
Then you stole it.
And then I stole it. It's called capitalism.
Give me a fucking break. But anyways, later.